Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here with another Product Growth Leaders conversation. Steve, we do a lot of conversations with product leaders in multiple different forums, and it seems like it's a mess out there. This week's topic is product leadership in crisis. In my conversations, I feel like product leaders are looking for some magic answer, right? That they're trying to figure out how do they make this work. So, I mean, you've been around this for longer than I have. Was this the same thing 30, 40 years ago?
No, I honestly feel like it has gotten worse rather than better. When I was coming up, product management was a leadership role. And over the course of my career, I've watched product managers become increasingly, development managers or sales engineers, and leaving a pretty big vacuum of leadership at the product level.
It is, and we're going to talk about that a little today, but also, is it a product leadership issue or is it a corporate leadership issue? And we'll get into that. And on Monday, we put this question into the community. Why do so many companies suffer from a lack of product leadership? We got a lot of very interesting answers. Paul Hatala always comes with some sharp stuff. I hope we can get him back onto some of the calls in the future. Product leadership requires vision and strategy, two things that tend to be weak at most organizations. Eva Beasley, leaned into diversity of the team and the lack of diversity maybe being the issue. May, you talked about product leadership in the end of our collective struggles during the time in the individual contributor ranks, right? How it's hard to switch from individual contributor to product leader.
I don't think it's a switch, right? Because when we start doing something as an individual contributor and you eventually maybe sort of set your sights on a management or a leadership role, or you fall into management or leadership, all you have is what you know. All you have is what you've observed, right? Maybe you might have taken some courses on what a good manager looks like. Maybe you have taken some courses on what product leadership looks like. But for the vast majority of people, like, all of our experiences and what we choose to do is strongly influenced by what we've witnessed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's like, what did you grow up with? Like, not even just in your childhood, not talking about childhood trauma, but also that impacts what you do in life. But like, your like product management childhood.
So it's almost a
That
self-fulfilling
trauma.
prophecy. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first,
But
bad
not
product
even
leadership?
that, right? Like, think about all the things that product managers talk about. Every time you sit down with them, they will tell you what's wrong. It's like, I don't have time to do product management. Why? Because there's always urgent roadmap changes from sales or from leadership. We're overwhelmed with doing other people's work. We're inundated with processes, and at the same time, we don't have processes to help us do our jobs. And we're constantly fighting for alignment, right? So when we get to the point where we're like, okay, finally, I am a product leader or a product, manager of product managers, I can finally change something, right? And we all well, let's say, not, I don't think we all go in, but a lot of us go in with the best intentions, and we're like, I am not going to let this happen again. But the system in which we exist, the corporate structure, no matter where you are, it's set up like the way things exist um, doesn't let you get out of that trap. Eventually, if we fall back into too much work, we fall back into like leadership pushing short-term gains for sales, right? So how do we even change that? Like, it's systemic. I think it's beyond just having the bad person or not enough training. It's systemic.
I agree completely. You talked about, as a product leader, you're expected to manage your team or team leads, to set a direction that's aligned with the corporate strategy, to help set that corporate strategy. to manage alignment with your peers across the company, and finally improve the practice of product management, which is the one that gets the least amount of time. Even when we move from individual contributor to product leader, we're still firefighting, aren't we?
Yeah, and I call it, so the work of improving the product management practice, which is what like a lot of product leaders want to do. I call it the permanent low priority elephant on your shoulders, because it will never be a top priority, but it will
Yep.
always be there, and if you do something about it, it will get easier. And this is why, like, if you are in that situation, it's so important to find someone else to do that work for you. This is why product operations exist.
I mean, is that one of the solutions, right? Product ops is a key to make product leadership better.
No, it is a way to give you time back to focus on the rest of the impossible task that is product
Okay,
leadership, right?
I get it.
Instead of
I
doing
I
5 jobs, you now have to do 4 jobs.
I I like that. I like that a lot. Eva, welcome. You were talking about a multifaceted answer, but something that's a recurring theme for you, diversity of the product team, right? And diversity within the product leadership.
Yeah, I think diversity goes hand in hand with accessibility, with cultural norms, with all types of things. I think if your product team is all, white male baby boomer generation type people, then you're going to get a product that is not built or made for today's standards, both in how it looks, how it behaves, how it is ethically, or, if it's made for all types of users. So I think diversity is kind of, for me, the number one reason maybe why, there may be a lack of kind of suffrage there with product leadership. But I know I had a few items on my list.
You did have a few items on your list, and all of them, a check. I think one interesting thing is all the research shows that the more diversity in a leadership team or board, the better performance of the organization. And to me, that sort of is just a cascade down within product leadership, right? Just look at this call. We've got a decent amount of white males on the call. And, we need to make sure that we think about that. And I think one thing Steve and I are actively trying to do is make sure we provide a platform for all voices to do that. You also talked about the fact that product management is not well defined.
Yeah, I think when I was looking for a product manager role, look, this was a couple years back, and I was applying to anything that said product management, and I got smart to the fact to realize that the job title does not match the job description. Many times I say you do not need a PMP certification to be a product manager, or a lot of times a technical product manager may be a product owner in disguise, where literally the description just states you're creating user stories. So I think if the role itself isn't well defined, then product leadership may suffer, because they don't know kind of how to lead that organization if they don't even know what the company needs and what the company is lacking from, as far as what people they currently have and they need.
Yeah, and then that goes hand in hand with your final point, which I thought was great, is about that there's a lot of the places where you've worked, product management mentorship is not prioritized, right? How can you be a leader? And I think this goes to May's point of all these things that we have to do that are on our plate. It's hard to do all of them. And unfortunately, things like building the practice and mentorship, to me, goes into building that practice. How do we not spend time doing that, right? How do we not? And for me as a product leader, my first time as a product leader, the hardest thing for me to do was to not catch all the balls that were falling. Right.
Yeah.
And it was a shift of mindset to catching the balls for them, to mentoring and helping them grow so they don't drop the balls to begin with. Any more thoughts on?
I think just the last thought I had on this is, yes, mentorship, coaching, that's never really a big given a big priority. And I think, just lack of experience, maybe. I'm just surmising here, but maybe product leadership is like, well, maybe if I give this newer product manager more work, they'll just automatically get it, and a light will, go off in their head, but I don't think that that's possible if they're not being coached and mentored to kind of correct the mistakes they made. If they don't, they're going to continue to make those mistakes. So again, giving someone a lot of work isn't essentially going to kind of fix their challenges.
Completely. I had, in that first product leadership role, I had a guy who in some areas was an A+ player, in some areas was a D or lower player. And I'm like, all you need to do is bring those D things up to a C, right? Or a B. And all of a sudden, and that's what we worked on. But that was me actually doing it. And I think that there is a lot of void there. Marco, you even went a little further than Eva. Eva talked about the lack of clear definition of what product management is. You even take it further to what a product is.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, this is one of the things that needs to be understood. And very often I see product managers turning more into technical product managers, even POs, and just focusing on the nitty gritty and feeding the beast. You know, I think Teresa Torres said that. Just making sure that you're providing features, you're a feature-driven organization, low-hanging fruit. And the funny thing is, it reverberates in product leadership as well. Like to your point of mentorship, it's not being focused on because it's not as tangible when it comes to the success metrics as releasing a feature, right? How do you measure that as a leader you made your product management team better? It's hard, right? So you can't just say, if I do X, I will get this result, and it's clearly defined. So people don't do it because it's one of these vague, ambiguous things that you can't really grasp. So you don't put focus on it because it's not a fire drill. It's not something that needs to be done by tomorrow or something that needs to be delivered to a customer. And this is really part of the issue I see constantly, that most leaders don't really see where the impact lies in them mentoring the team, in them ensuring that something's understood. I mean, I've just made that experience myself, that within a strategy, I made a wrong statement. And of course, leadership then said, I mean, how come you didn't understand that? We've been preaching that the entire time. And then they also asked themselves, how did we not make this clear to everybody? Why is this not ingrained in everybody's brain? And yeah, I mean, it's probably because this is not something I was focused on. It was assumed that people get it. When it's, including when it comes to mentorship, you put something out there and you say, well, let's see how you can improve upon that and let's revisit. But if you just put it out there and say, this is what we should all do, and then you just leave and let people interpret what you meant, they're not going to adopt it.
Yeah, and Steve and I were having a conversation about sort of triggers for the need for better strategy, and one of them was, are all the decisions being rolling back up to leadership, right? As a leader, if you're not, to use the word from last week, empowering your team, right? You're not giving your team the knowledge they need, the clarity of a strategy, the understanding of a strategy to help them make decisions. What are you doing, right? And so there's almost two sides of that coin. There's the practice of product and helping them get better, but there's also the enabling and empowering them with a good strategy to move forward. So, you know, it's
to add one thing, I think the most important thing here is don't just set the strategy, make sure it's understood.
Yeah. That's the test I use for strategy. And I think I got it from somebody else, but I can't find any references to it. So I'll call it my own now. Is it clear, right? Is it understood? When you share it to people, oh, I get that. It makes sense. And two, can they make decisions based on it, right? Because if it's not clear, if they don't understand it, you've already lost. If it's clear and they understand it, but it doesn't enable them or empower them to make decisions that they don't have to roll back up to you, wow, right? You know, those are two things you need to do. So, Calvin, many companies don't understand the role of product management. So you're coming back to sort of where Eva was, right?
I guess, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just thought back to my experiences with people that I would work for, and they just didn't understand the role. And so, if you're not understanding the product management role, how are you expected to lead in it? And immediately I thought of a product manager role that, I realized 2 weeks into it that what I was doing was not what I had signed up for, and it ended up being like more sales support. And that's, that becomes a function of somebody in the, as a director of product management that had never been in the role and had no concept of what it's supposed to encompass. And I think that that happens a lot. Yeah.
So there's a couple things to unpack there. One is, and I'm going to hit Steve on this because I know this is something he's talked about before. Sometimes you're getting people who are product leaders who haven't done product management, and the other, which is interrelated, even many people who did do product management, back to May's point, they did it in a definition that wasn't really strategic or business. It was very tactical. Steve and I were talking in our Principles of Product Strategy course. We introduced a definition of product lifecycle management that was to maximize the value created for the market and the organization across the lifecycle, throughout the lifecycle. I can't remember exact wording of the product. And we started thinking about that. That actually is not a bad definition for product management, right? It really leans into the business role, the strategic role of product management, and that our job is to help maximize the value created for the market, for customers, and the value created for the business. And that's sort of a key intersection. Everybody talks about this feasible, viable, type stuff. But for me, it's like, there's only two things. Does it create value for the market? And that would be the buyers and the users. And does it create value for our business? That's, maybe if we want to be a more, holistic, give back to the world, we put stakeholders in there too. The economy, the community, and that type of stuff. I could see that in a Drucker type way. See, I had to get Drucker in there. But Steve, you were talking about it, whether it was on this call last week or in one of our other conversations, because we talk basically every day. You're this thing where you're seeing a lot of non-product management people becoming product leaders.
Yeah, and I really don't understand it. If I can't fathom a VP of development who's never developed, or a VP of sales who's never sold. And I've heard about companies that swap their executives around. But I mean, certainly if you want to understand the job your people are doing, having done that job helps a lot. But I think in many cases, even if they do have a product background, it occurs to me, based on your last definition there, that most product managers are not product managers, they're release managers. They're not looking at it through the life cycle.
Yeah. And I believe that some of the thought leaders in the industry, training companies and other thought leaders, have actually perpetuated this. They've leaned into this tactical role versus keeping it sort of in the strategic realm. So, Cory, as you always do, Joy hasn't been on a while, but it seems like you've channeled your inner Joy with a nice short question that really hits it. Ego and trust.
Yeah, they think they know better. They don't need anybody else to tell them what to do or how to solve a problem. They think they know the right thing to do because they're in charge, and they don't trust anybody else to do it. So to get to the point of what Steve was saying of release managers and delivery managers, is just go do what I'm telling you to do. Don't empower your people and go figure out the problems to solve. And I may not know those. And that's okay that I don't know those. And I trust you to go figure that out. It's, to me, in my experience, it's more of the, I want you just to do these things. I don't want you to solve these problems. I just want you to do these things because those are my ideas and I just want to see them done.
I mean, it's sort of a, Go ahead, Steve.
I actually had this conversation this week. Somebody said he joined the firm. The president said, you know, we've done all this discovery. We know we're right. And 6 months in, he went, well, I can't find anybody who wants this thing you're asking me to build. Who did you do discovery with? And the president said, oh, I talked to the sales guys. And, you know, so the result of our conversation was assume no discovery has been done. You know, do your own original primary research
Or
figure out if you're actually building something that the market will value.
Yeah, and I was just today I was putting out something and we were talking about the concept of a painted door, which is, you know, a label or an activity on a page that somebody in your application that somebody might want to use. You put a painted door up there and they click on it and it says, hey, this feature isn't available yet. Would you like to know more? And it kind of gives them the idea, but it gives you data. Somebody clicked on this button and said they wanted that thing or they are interested in it, which is a hell of a lot different than having a discovery call 6 months ahead of time where somebody says, oh yeah, I would totally use that. And then they totally don't when the button is available because actions speak louder than words. And that's the way you figure that out. So even that conversation of, yeah, I talked to the sales guy, even if the sales guy was right, that data is so old that by the time the market shifted, the customer shifted, everything is shifted.
Which is why learning is a core skill in product management and the core of the Quartz Open framework.
Yeah, and why validation has to happen throughout the whole process, not just at the beginning, right? And I love that idea of the painted door. I think it's really, I like it a lot. A great way to validate and to get that data as you're talking about. The other thing I'm going to go back to what May said earlier about how product leaders have too much on their plate. Yet the ego and trust come into it, and it's like they're not willing to assign to people, right? Part of leadership is empowering your team, your organization to do stuff, right? And if you try to take it all yourself or all the fun stuff yourself and just make them do all the hard work, that's not building a great culture, and it's not empowering them to lift, right? I helped bring some software companies to channel. Right. And if you took a direct sales force, a lot of them didn't like the idea of channel. But I'm like, here's the deal. With a good channel organization, you can lift a whole bunch more, right? They become a pulley, right? The more good channel partners you have, the more pulleys you have, the higher a number you can lift. And that's the same thing with a product organization, right? The more good people we have in the product organization, the more our organization can do, the better chance we have of success. If you try to make it just on yourself, you're setting yourself up and your organization up for failure. So maybe a little humility. We've talked about that, and maybe it's partly the hubris of a lot of product leaders that get in the way. I'll take that back to Eva's statement of the demographic of a lot of product leaders could be contributing to that. Dutch, we've been saying a lot. I'd love to get, your take on this.
Sorry, I was responding to a text message about a meeting later today and had to get myself off mute. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I was listening though. So I can usually just say like what everyone else said, because everyone has great ideas. I align a lot of times with what has been mentioned. I think a lot of it does go basically to the lack of understanding and respect along with the trust for the role, and what the responsibilities are. There's always misconceptions based on the words and labels that we put on things. What's a manager? Well, people think of a certain thing for managers, and managing the concepts and the strategy behind the product isn't what a lot of people think what a manager would end up doing. That's more of a director or an executive or something. And then when you start talking about the fact that a product manager is focused on, voice of the customer, that's customer service, you're customer facing. And so a lot of the roles or the responsibilities seem to touch everything. And so when it touches everything, is it one thing? You know, I just think that once our community, not just product growth leaders, but the community of all product managers, can fight for ourselves and give executives the concept of what it is that we do, focusing on the what and the why. You know, what's the problem and why are we the best to solve it? And let everyone else figure out the how it gets done, and maybe even a little bit of the when, for what currently is being worked on and such. It's overwhelming. I mean, not only do we have so much on our plates, but we have so much on our career that we touch. It's hard to wrangle it in and figure out what's being done on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I was talking to a former coworker last week, and she said, you know, we've been in this is 30 years, right? We've been trying to solve the same problems, and it seems like we're still trying to solve the same problems when it comes to what is product management, what's the value of product management, getting people to understand that business role. It's tough.
Yeah, and I think another problem of it is the fact that in a startup, you can have one person that's doing everything for product management. But then as the product grows and as the company grows, you need more people to do what that one person was doing. You know, you need the technical product manager / product owner. You need the day-to-day product manager. You need the strategic product manager. You need leadership above those in order to do what, as a small team, one person could do.
Yeah.
So there's more roles. It's just, as a startup, you're wearing all the hats at the same time and looking silly.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I've been in a situation where a CEO founder was playing all those roles and grew and wouldn't let go of them, right? That causes issues as well. There's going to be different, as you scale, there's different skills needed. Any last thoughts on, you know, why companies are suffering from a lack of product leadership before we move to the poll? All right. On Wednesday, we put this poll question in the community. What is the leading contributor to the lack of product leadership? Senior leadership that does not get the value of product management, product leaders who do not come from a product management background, product leaders who struggle to evangelize for the role of strategic product management, lack of diversity in product leadership and product management, and other it depends. And we had, you know, 18% other it depends, led by Paul Hatala, saying that it's about lack of strategy. I may have sort of said that I would have put that as that top one where I voted. Eva, you were one of the 18% of people who voted for the lack of diversity. You've made that case already. You know, anything more to add on that?
The only thing is I shared a quote from something I found on Women in Product, and it says, as product leaders, to build inclusive products and embody all communities we serve, we must ensure that our companies and multidisciplinary teams internally have diverse people with distinct perspectives and viewpoints that represent actual market segments. So I honestly can't say it better than Women in Product.
Yeah, no, I love that. And again, research has shown that diversity in leadership is an indicator of success, of overperforming the mean. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. Calvin, you were one of the 18% who said product leaders who do not come from a product management background. Again, you talked about that in the Monday question. Anything more you'd like to talk about that?
Yeah, I made a comment below, which is 2 is a product of 1.
Okay.
You know, and that's really it. Yeah, I don't know if I could say much more than that. I think that's pretty clear. In my mind, it's fairly clear.
Yeah, awesome. Cory, May, myself, all went in Dutch, all went for the senior leadership does not get value. I want to give Marco and Steve a chance because I don't think they voted before. Where would you go, Steve?
Here we go. I had to blow up the poll here. Well, all of those are really good choices, but I'm going to vote for product leaders who do not come from a product management background. How can they mentor? How can they manage their people if they don't really understand what their people do?
Okay. And I thought that might be something you would say. Just from the recent conversations. Marco, how about you?
So I didn't vote. I must have forgotten. Yeah, it's a hard one, I have to admit. I would have said all of the above. Because yeah, it's the strategy needs to be communicated. It needs to be made very, very clearly understandable, which also does mean that they have to understand product management to begin with in order to communicate it appropriately, right?
Yeah.
That, and of course, understanding what a product manager actually can and cannot do, or can do, should do, doesn't have to do, right? Again, don't throw this over the fence and then expect a product manager to pick it up and understand it immediately and find meaning in it. So empowering does look different. Empowering does mean a certain amount of guidance still needs to be there. So yeah, if I had to pick one, I would probably still be the first one, because the value of product management does require you to understand product management.
All right. I love it. Cory, got to have a good environment to be possible for good things to happen.
Yeah, we started talking about it earlier and I dropped a note in chat, but you can have a rose grow in a garbage heap, in a trash dump. You can see, beautiful things grow in odd places, but it's awful hard to do that. One of the guys I like to follow is an agile coach, but he's also a gardener. And he talks a lot about gardening and how farmers, and when you have to have good soil for things to grow, or it's easier to grow good things in good soil. And now that's what you're welcome, Eva, for having that song stuck in your head. Every rose does has its thorn. But it's awful hard to do good things in a bad place. It's easier to do good things in good places, and whatever you define good place as. But that environment is so critical to success. And that's where I've left organizations and I've seen struggle, where I try to do good things. Good things can happen, but they're so hard to get done. And they're so hard to convince people that that's the right thing to do. And then as soon as I leave, or as soon as a good product person leaves, everything goes back to the way it was, because it wasn't the right environment for that type of thing anyway. They tolerated you for doing that for a while, even if you were successful. Like I've been in places where, we improved the quality to practice, the revenue, the base, whatever, by like 30%. And they were like, that's good enough. We only want 30% improvement. I'm like, but you can have so much more. They're like, no. 30% is more than enough for us. Okay.
I get it. I like it. And it goes back to our conversation earlier this year on toxic companies and toxic bosses, right? Sometimes you can't change it. May, you said you couldn't vote for the second one.
No, it is the most attractive option. Like reading through that list, I'm like, okay, I feel like I have many, many reasons to vote for number 2, like, which is product leaders.
Number 2 is
don't have a product management background, but that is a symptom, not the cause. The cause is senior management that doesn't understand what product management is, that doesn't understand the need for product management. The reason why you would have product leaders who don't have a product management background is that they don't understand why you have product management. Right? Like if you understand truly what the value of product leadership is, then absolutely know you need someone with experience, right? I mean, yes, you're gonna always you can't always hire people who are experienced product leaders. That's just not gonna work. You're always gonna have to eventually promote someone and like train people to do it. But like at least they have product management experience, you know? So it's like all these startups that try to target all of these like young aspiring product managers to be their first PM, and then they underpay them and force them to be release managers, or underpay them and like expect them to do literally everything.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're head of product at the startup that might have accidentally got lucky. And then what? Right? Like, have they learned anything? It's hard to tell.
Yeah. For me, I never had the title product manager before I was a director and leading a team, but I had been a market research person. I'd been a strategy person. I'd been a marketing person. I'd been a partnerships person. So I had built this portfolio of product management skills. So sometimes it doesn't have to be the title, but it has to be the responsibility, the capability that goes into it. And basically, I was doing product management as the director of marketing, and they said, "Why don't we just make you director of product management?" and gave me a team. So I think that back to, I think Eva was the one who said in the beginning, titles are a mess, right? It doesn't matter the title. People could have a product management title and they were doing, Scrum leadership and project management and not really doing it. So it's really looking at what people have done and the experiences and capabilities they have. Love it. Dutch, you also voted senior leadership. And for those who don't see it, 45% senior leadership not understanding the value of product management was the lead vote getter.
Yeah, goes with the first question, just not understanding what product management does. I was at a company who had a product management team that had a VP of product, but that was after they had a VP of content and product, because they had editorial person that was in charge, and content is dealing with the technology and how it's output, so it's going to be one person. They shifted to having a VP of product, and then that individual decided, well, we need to create a product ops team, which was great, but that ops team really didn't collaborate much with the rest of product management. They were collaborating with senior leadership, and then product management got shifted to under the CTO, and was all technical product managers who still didn't collaborate with product ops, at least not the entire team. Some people were, but for a year and a half they were there, and it really, it was a mess. All because they just didn't understand what the value was and what it meant. And just because we need something else doesn't mean that what you have has to go away. Add the new thing. Don't change what you have to that, because then you're back to the drawing board of, oh, well, now we need to have someone doing the first thing again.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
That reminds me of a story from a couple of years ago. A friend called and said that they'd had a reorg and they had laid off the entire product management department. And a month later, HR called all of the product managers back and said, "We just figured out what you do. Would you return?" And no, of course, everybody was like, "Are you out of your mind? I mean, no, I would never come back to your company now." And furthermore, all of them had gotten new jobs since then. And it's just like, we just figured out what you do, which is just, kind of mind blowing. And yet, Grant and I do these racy exercises with clients. And it's amazing the number of things that people say, "Oh, I'm responsible for that," or I had no idea I was responsible for that. And the people who most benefit from these sessions that we do is the HR department. They come in and they go, "This is brilliant. We finally know what a product manager is supposed to be doing."
Yeah, exactly. And May put into the chat this sort of new title of strategy and operations that's coming up, and I'm seeing it mostly in VC funded, unicorny type companies. But what they've really done is they've realized they didn't have strategic product management, so they created a title which was strategy and ops to do that for them. But the ops never makes sense to me, because that's like two sides of it: the practice side and the ops, and the strategy side. Sometimes that might be a better in separate roles. May?
I have like 7 articles in draft about this. Like it makes me so angry. I'm not gonna go into it. It's off topic.
All right.
I've got like 3 that are in draft for this exact topic.
Right.
Calvin, you raised your hand, or you just
Yeah.
acknowledge?
No, I was going to share that that's kind of what I'm doing right now is some, strategy and operational product management. I'm not involved in any of the, as in a software company, I'm not involved in the technical stuff. So it's, I mean, it's stretching me, but it's the stuff that the technical product managers don't think about, which is all the business stuff and the operational stuff.
If you
Right.
if you define operations as the business of the product, sure, I can get that. But product operations, as the way it's defined, is really about the practice of the product and helping product managers do a better job. It just, I don't know. It seems like Larry Bossidy in his book Execution said you've got strategy people and you've got execution people or operations people, and those are 2 separate things.
Okay, so I'll pipe in here. The the nature of product management is intrinsically strategic and operational, right? Like there's no way around it. However, this strategy and ops role often sits next to or around product management. So where it gets complicated is where the delineations exist. And the nature of strategy, I believe personally, belongs to product management. Because like who else should own strategy, really? Like you're deciding what goes into the product, you're deciding what to do next. That's strategic. There are such things as strategic operations where you figure out like what is the best way to improve your operations. So if you're putting the words strategy and operations together, like the best way to do it is call it strategic operations, because you're really thinking about how do we do this. Not, you can also think about how do we do strategy, but that's just the operations of strategy. But that's still not just strategy by itself, right? Strategy by itself is very much what product management is. However, when you have product management strategy, and operations, then like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
So
no.
that's like, I think it's okay for product management to have both strategy aspects and operations aspects. And in fact, that is a part of the job. But like, aside from that, if you split out product strategy and product operations, then what on earth is product management?
Yeah. No, I agree completely. So let's try to go ahead.
Real quick, in my military background, we had people that were strategy, operations, and tactical implementation. We didn't have product management as a specialty, but we did have people that focused at 3 different levels of process and mindset.
No, I think there's a lot to be learned from that, and we need to figure that stuff out. We only have time for 1 question before our takeaways, and we've been talking a lot about why do we suffer from it and what's the cause of it. What does good product leadership look like? Right? We've talked a lot about what it doesn't look like, but what does it look like? Eva.
Okay, I'm kind of on a tangent right now, but I would love to see more product leaders be vulnerable. I know when COVID started, we all talked about empathy and being empathetic for your customers and your employees, but I want to see leadership be vulnerable. And I posted about this yesterday in a public Slack channel at my work because I'm an open book. And I'm like, okay, this is what's happening with me. This is the hardships I'm facing next month. And yeah, let's just get into it. And I was surprised that like 10 other people responded with vulnerabilities, but all of these were, people with that weren't very high up on the food chain. So I really would want more leadership to just tell us what they're worried about, tell us what, keeps them up at night. And that might make others realize, hey, this is why maybe they're pushing so hard, or they're stressed, or they're pressuring their employees. Just be a human.
I love that. And I think I always like using humility. And I think it was C.S. Lewis who defined humility as is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And that takes me back to Cory's stuff from earlier about ego and trust. And so I love good product leadership looks like empathy, vulnerability, humility. I can get totally behind that. Marco.
Tough one. Well, first of all, I would say respect the safe place. Part of the problem is that I very often see people look to leadership for strategy and all the answers, and then leadership getting upset when that is not understood. When in fact, I mean, leaders are humans too, right? They need to the point that Eva had earlier, be vulnerable enough to put out that maybe they don't know the answer. Maybe they're looking for the answer and need the rest of the team to support them and understand it. I mean, it's on the one hand, different perspectives, but it's also the ability to say, well, maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I can't tell you what to do. We define it together and then we stand behind it, but I still try to get keep the bigger picture. And that only happens if people aren't mute because they're afraid of the repercussions of going against what they think is the strategy set up by leadership.
No, I love that. Calvin.
You know, I think I hadn't thought of that the way that Eva and Marco had defined that, but I think those are really good qualities. So in addition to like humility, not knowing what you are, being open about what you don't know and being vulnerable, also willingness to learn, a willingness to uncover, curiosity, you know, knowledge, experience.
Love it. Dutch.
My mute button always eludes me. I'll give an answer like a customer. I don't know how to describe what I want, but I'll know it when I see it.
It's sort
I
of
know
like
what good
art,
product
right?
leadership is when I see it.
Yeah. It is a feeling. You know, it's you when I've seen it, it's somebody who, you know, inspires you. It's somebody who, you know, both with the vision and the strategy, but also with that vulnerability and humility, makes you want to come together and work with them. I love it. Cory.
I was trying
And
to
don't
find...
just say you. Good leadership looks like Cory.
No. I was trying to find, there was something in one of Kagan's books that I can't remember the exact quote on, but there's something about this idea of winning products come from the deep understanding of the user needs combined with an equally deep understanding of what's just now possible. It's putting those things together. It's not, please God, don't let it be filling in a Gantt chart that doesn't change for the next 6 months. Stop. It's what are the problems in the market? How can we solve those problems better than anybody else? And how can our business benefit as a result of doing that?
I love that. That's great. Steve.
Well, it really depends, I think, on which product leadership we're talking about. I mean, in some ways, it's, you know, my expectation is that the product manager is the product leader of the product. However, I think your question really is the leadership of product management. What does that look like? And I'm reminded of, reminded of a book I mentioned, I think, a few weeks ago. Customers come second. Employees come first. As a manager of people, right? My people should come first. I should be grooming them for their next position. I should be supporting them when they're being attacked by other departments. I remember vividly years ago, I was just a young product manager. I was walking through support and I saw one of the support reps in tears. And I went over and took the phone and said, hello. And this person was swearing like I've never heard, and I'm pretty good at swearing. And I said, well, we will not tolerate that. Thank you for calling, click. And you know, everybody was just aghast that I had done this, right? But it's just like, no, I'm supporting the people and they're not even my people.
Yeah.
So I reminded of the reverse org chart, you know, that it's a pyramid where the management is below the people, supporting them, right? And to me, that's leadership.
No, I love that. And you know, I'm going to point to my little sign, right? I think that there's a lot to learn about from Ted Lasso about, you know, how do you make people better people, right? It's about how do you treat the people and the individuals. And it's interesting because none of this has come to strategy. I think strategy is key, but a lot of product leadership is about empowering the organization to help you do that. And get,
You know, and an interesting add to that is he didn't know football.
No.
So, you know, earlier we kind of I ranted a little bit about, you know, how can you be a leader of product managers if you've never done product management? And yet the Ted Lasso answer is support them, motivate them, you know, encourage them, and also assume that they know what they're doing, because he certainly didn't.
I think the term he used was helping them become a better version of themselves. And I think, you know, it's interesting how
that's leadership.
As somebody who tends to lean on the strategy side, when we come to what does it look like, everybody here is talking about that side of it. So, Steve, I know you have to sign off a little early. What's your biggest takeaway from this conversation?
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso. You know, support your people, make them the better version of themselves.
I love it. Marco.
And with that, I'm out of here. See you in a week.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Marco, what about you?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's exactly right. It's not just making sure that your team, is empowered and all that, but they understand what you're after and you have their back. Now, don't throw them under a bus if you get heat from above, because I see this all the time. You know, and and it demotivates people. They put in the time, they put in the work. And all of a sudden being shut down because you didn't know what leadership needed from you, that's just not right.
No, I always viewed one of my main jobs as a leader as providing air cover for my team so they could get their jobs done. I had their back. Dutch.
My biggest takeaway is the fact that we all need to grow into those leadership positions and solve this ourselves.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of work and it's hard, but and some people aren't cut out for it. I think we have to realize that too. Just because you're a great individual contributor doesn't mean you're going to be a great leader. Calvin.
First, I agree very much with what you just said, for reasons I won't get into, because it'll take us down a different path. But I'm always, in these conversations, I'm always interested in how different people have a different view other than my own. And so I always take away something, something there around what leadership is, what leadership isn't, and what leadership looks like. So
I got it. Eva.
I really liked what Steve said about like customers second, employees first. So my kind of my last comment would be, leaders, take care of your people, check in, make sure they're okay. A lot of times people will smile and it's fake to make you more comfortable, or say everything's fine to make you more comfortable. Just make sure that, they're okay, because right now things are kind of difficult all around.
No, 100% agree. Cory.
How unlikely it is that this problem will be solved in my lifetime. If it hasn't been solved in Steve's lifetime, if it's only gotten worse, may see the beginning of the realization that this has been solved, but I don't know how long it's going to take to really solve this problem of product leadership in organizations.
I don't want to solve it. I just want to get 30% better at it, Cory. I'm kidding.
I hate you.
I had to bring that back.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right, my friend May.
I think there's a couple of aspects of what we talked about. And the first one is it goes back to your vision brings people into the organization and your leadership makes them stay. So what does the leadership mean? Well, there's the people leadership aspects that we talked about: vulnerability, emotional vulnerability, support, and also just generally being a good manager. But also from the product side, what Cory said about, really understanding and focusing on a strategy so people know what they're doing. Like, let your teams be product managers. And, as product managers, we work with our counterparts. As product leaders, you have to also work with your counterparts and set those expectations and set those roles and responsibilities with your peers. And it's all of those things that come together that make up the concept of product leadership. And I think, does it make sense for that to be one person?
I mean, at some point, there's one the buck that has to stop somewhere, right? In honestly, when we started our takeaways, I was leaning towards the Ted Lasso. It's all about the soft side, but then May, you got me coming back to it. It's like that perfect balance of the strategy and vision and the empowering side. Because how do you empower your team if you don't give them a clear strategy they understand that helps them do their job and make decisions? And I remember, my biggest responsibility job, I was at a division of GE. I had 300 million of revenue, and they couldn't hire people for open positions in that group before I was hired. People wouldn't come internally, right? People didn't want to come there. 12 months into my stay, they made a rule that they were limiting people coming to my team from the other parts, because the people are like, I understand what you're trying to do now. I get the strategy. I get how you teach, a lot of Tom Peters management by walking around. And I think it's that perfect balance of the two you have to have if you're going to have success with this. Wow, what a great conversation on this. And obviously we hit this topic and a lot of things we talk about, and we'll probably be coming back and talk some more, maybe give us a better chance to solve it in Cory's lifetime. But Steve and Dutch had to leave early. Marco, Calvin, Eva, Cory, May, thank you for some great conversation on this topic. Next week, we're going to have just as good a conversation, if not better, on portfolio management, right? Where does portfolio management play with product management, right? Two different titles intertwined. So next week, we're going to talk about portfolio management. And we do this every week. Monday, the question goes in. Monday, it'll be a question about portfolio management. Wednesday, we have the poll. And Friday, we have these amazing conversations. And I thank each and every one of you for always making these great conversations where I learn, I grow, I change my perspectives. This is, probably my happiest hour, work hour every week. And it's because of you guys. So thank you so much. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you next week in the community. Take care, everybody.